Welcome to the Outlander Unhinged podcast, where we talk deep dives, wild theories, and the heart of Outlander. I'm Doreen.
I'm Liz.
I'm Jenny.
I'm Katie. Grab your snacks, Sassenachs. It's time to talk about Outlander.
It is so good to be back this week, Sassenachs. It was crazy, taking some time away, but I'm so glad that we are back at the round table for Outlander Unhinged. And welcome to episode 8, everyone. We are really, really excited for this one. Jenny, do you want to introduce today's topic?
Today's topic is Book 2 versus Season 2, The Things Left Out.
All right. So each of us picked one event we felt should not have been left out of the show because of the impact that it had on the story. And trust me, we could have picked more, but we've learned we have to limit things or else we will talk all day long. So, starting with Jenny, what event have you chosen that was left out of Book 2?
Katie, you just are in Dragonfly with Amber, correct, in your book club?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So I had gone along with the weeks with Katie in her book club with Dragonfly and Amber. So some of the things, and this isn't true poor Roger Mac fashion, I did not do as deep of a dive on him because I got distracted by another topic that's coming up later. So, but that just kind of is fitting for Roger Mac. I feel like he doesn't get the credit he deserves. So a couple of the things that I picked up on in the reread were that Diana has laid out for us that he is important to the story. And I don't know that people necessarily pick up on these things. So I'm going to read a specific line in, I guess it's chapter 1. It's page 27. And it says here, it's upon his meeting with Claire. And he said, he imagined that if he touched her, a great spark of static electricity would leap between them. Now, I think most times when people read stuff like that, they think sexually charged and they think, Roger's looking at Claire and Claire's a good looking woman. She's fit. And I think for the most part, we kind of miss that in the writing. And it is early on in the story that it's introduced. So we don't necessarily think too much about that. So then a little bit further on, there's a scene where Roger is taking a bath and he's being annoyed by Fiona and she keeps coming in. Do you have your soap? Yes. Do you have your towel? And he gets so mad. And he's like, no, I don't have my towel. He's counting to 10. He's really frustrated. I do miss the fact that they don't have that much of a banter. Like Fiona's not introduced really at all until, later, like it's just a few spots, but they do have a relationship there that was left out. So he has this moment in the bathtub, and I think it's specifically set up this way so you have a different opinion of what's happening here. And he's in the bathtub and he starts thinking about Claire and that he had a sudden startling vision of Claire Randall's fine white limbs, locked in wild abandon with the naked, straining body of a red-haired man. The two bodies slick with rain and stained with crushed grass, twisting in ecstasy among the standing stones. The vision was so shocking in its specificity that it left him trembling, sweat running down his chest to vanish into the steaming water of the bath. This right here introduces that Roger Mac has the sight. I don't think that is played out at all within the show, that we realize he's got this much going on with the sight. We know that there are so many members of the McKenzie family that have it. We've got Joni McKenzie. We've got Jenny. We do know that Jamie has some sort of a sight that's being introduced later on. But if you've watched the show, you at least know that part. So I do think that the show really dumbed him down to the point where I don't think fans like him. And I think if you read the books, you're going to like Roger Mac a whole lot more. So that's kind of, I do think that's kind of what all I have to say really is that I just don't think that they expanded enough upon the importance of him. And I don't know whether that would give way to like them tipping some information, but I don't think so. I just think that they kind of dumbed down his character to be like a sexist boob, and there's so much more to him. Go ahead, Liz.
So first and foremost, finally, justice for Roger McDaddy Woo. Justice prevails. Okay. So I love that we're talking about Roger and a lot of his character arc being left out, especially in the very beginning of the story, because I agree with you, Jenny. These thoughts that he has, this inner monologue of his, it is so incredibly powerful, and it lends itself so well to a greater understanding of his character development, even this early on. And I know that in the show, we don't really start to get that until season 7. And I think it's a disservice to his character to have not included at least some of the inner monologue, but also the problem solving that he goes through, just the general thoughts that he has to himself while he's going through his life and creating this journey for himself. So I love that you mentioned that, and I think it's an excellent point of something that was left out.
Thank you. Look, I do like Roger McDaddy. I do think he gets the short end of the stick in the show. And there's so many people that dislike him, but I think they amplified these particular traits, and we've so ignored the more important ones. And maybe that's in the show to build up to something. I don't know, but right now it annoys me. Anyone else? Any thoughts?
Yes, I do. Okay. I want to clarify something. I don't dislike Roger. I dislike Frank, but I don't dislike Roger. And
I'll take it.
I think I said this in the episode that we were doing of the onions, nuts, and mushrooms about Roger, that in the show, I kind of think they made him a weak ass bitch, I think is what I said.
Yes.
And the book
Brutal
character, and I expanded on this greatly, is so much deeper. And especially as you get in later books and get his inner monologue and learn about his past, it really he's one of the most developed characters, which is why I had classified him as an onion. And when Jenny said that she was going to talk about this portion of the book, I thought to myself way back, I had sent Jenny an annotation that I had made from this book. And my annotations with this scene with Roger is, can Roger sense other travelers? ? Are Roger and Claire somehow connected? ? Is Roger able to read energy? ? And I told her, and we've talked about this a lot, and Liz, I know you guys talk about this as well, but I think that Roger and Claire have a metaphysical connection. And there's examples in much later books that are so deep and so supportive of this that I cannot wait for you guys to get to this point, because your minds are going to just be blown. And I can't wait for the text messages. But I've always said that Roger is very spiritual and he's very intuitive, and it comes from the Mackenzie's line. And I think his entire role in the series is shepherding everyone into the space between and accessing their powers. But that's a conversation we've had before. But I got really excited for this topic to come up because I don't think anyone who has only watched the show understands how powerful Roger is. And even at this point in the books that we're talking about right now, this is just scraping the surface. The stuff that is revealed so much later is just mind-bending. So I just wanted to say that. You have something, Katie?
Yes. So I think you made excellent points. And I think, and I know Liz and I share this thought, and I have zero explanation, but I think, we have both said that we think he's going to play a part in whatever is to come or whatever is going to happen to Jamie in season 8. And I think just based on show Roger, I never would have thought that. But now reading the books, we get such a deeper look into Roger and his thought process. And it's just, there's something more to him, because I feel like Diana doesn't let you look into people's minds unless they serve a specific purpose, if that makes sense. And I just think I agree with what you have all said, that I think he has a bigger part to play.
When I was rereading this, I had screenshot this. I have all my scribbly notes in the thing, and I sent it to Doreen. I'm like, I cannot believe how differently I am reading this now, with just a different mindset. Like when you go into the show, like you said, he's just there, and it's definitely not definitely don't pull out of his character what really is in these books. And I was so excited to see that I was on the right path. And I do think it's all in Diana's writing. I've said this before about a specific passage in a later book. She goes on and on in great detail, and you miss the point of what she's trying to say. She buries it in there, and it's very specific on her part doing that. So you're kind of led away, but you find it eventually. What were you going to say, Doreen?
So in this book, in this very book, right, we see the scene where Master Raymond is healing Claire, and he's encouraging her to call to the red man. In that scene, Claire is tapping into Jamie and using him as a power source to heal herself, because just her and Raymond's powers are not strong enough. And I think, without giving, these aren't spoilers, but I think that Roger and Claire and Roger and some other characters also have that ability to kind of tap into others, almost like an amplifier for their power. And I feel like these are alluding to Roger having powers that Claire maybe doesn't necessarily have, that she's going to need to tap into later in this story. And I think a lot of people see Roger and Claire's connection as like a mother-son, because he never had a mother. And Liz, you made a video, Jenny was saying, this like really funny video about why is he always kissing like
Morag.
or I can't remember what the context. Yes,
His great grandmother.
Yeah, what is that about? But I think it's more about he's being drawn to her because they have a spiritual, energetic connection. So
what you're saying is so true, because like you see that immediate connection as soon as they meet each other. Like she shows up on his doorstep in Dragonfly and Amber, and he doesn't even like think twice. He's like, you know, when she tells him the situation, I feel like he's, yeah, she might be crazy, but like, I'm also willing to go down this rabbit hole. Let's go. Let's, you know. So I just think you're right. I think he's drawn to certain people, and I don't know. There's something about him. There really is. But I really am enjoying book Roger more than show Roger, just because we're getting, not that I don't like show Roger. I like him more in the books because we're just getting more of him. We're getting to know him a lot better, I feel like, than we did in the show.
Well, we're going to see something, I think. I hope you know where I'm going with this, Doreen. In a later book, it's already been shown in season 7. It's a change in the story about being able to feel other travelers. And so I can't wait for you guys to get to that part of the book, because you're going to see some people that have similar, I guess, gifts as him. And yeah, I just can't wait for you to get there. Go ahead, Liz.
Music to my ears, you guys. You have no idea how much this is making me so happy. But also, I agree with what's been said about Roger having a spiritual connection. And I think I have viewed him in the books almost similar to an empath who can feel the emotions of other people. And maybe those emotions sometimes come across not just as emotions, but as powers or something different. I agree that he connects with the people around him in a very different way. And I'm still very early on in the books. I'm still making my way through Bruno, but I have even seen a lot of growth and change in Roger, even there, just about halfway through the book. So it's been really nice to be able to chart his journey, but also get to see these different sides of him when everything was first starting in book 2. So it's just been really nice.
Liz, you're just in all your glory right now because we're all talking positive about Roger. So I think that means it's time to switch subjects and go on to Katie's.
Fine.
So Liz is like, if we have to. So the difference I'm going to be discussing is one of the most heartbreaking and pivotal scenes in Outlander, when Jamie sends Claire back through the stones right before the Battle of Culloden. Now, the book and the show obviously have the same outcome, but how they get there is very different. And I do love the dance to the stones, but I also love the way Diana wrote it. And there are some things I wish they would have included in the show. So I'm going to give a quick recap of what happens in the show and the book, and then explain what I wish would have been included in the show. So in the show, we know Jamie takes Claire up the hill to Craignadoon. He tells her what to tell Frank, that he's grateful, he trusts him, he hates him to the very marrow of his bones. Claire tries to get Jamie to come with her, but he can't hear the stones. He tells her he'll find her, if he has to endure 200 years, all that speech that makes us swoon and sob at the same time. So, then they make love and she gives him the dragonfly and amber. Claire says, blood of my blood. Jamie says, bone of my bone. And Claire says, so long as we both shall live. I know I'm being very specific, but it will come into play later. Jamie gives Claire his father's ring and tells Claire tells him that she'll name the baby Brian after his father. And they do the dance to the stones. They say, I love you. Jamie says goodbye to Claire, and then she goes back. Now in the book, Jamie obviously still takes Claire to Craignadoon, but there's a ruined cottage down the hill from the stone circle that they go into first. Claire tells Jamie that she's not going to go back to her time. She's going to go back to Culloden Moor with him to die. She tells him that she won't and she can't live without him. And Jamie says, and I love this line so much, he says, do you think I don't know? It's me that has the easy part now. For if you feel for me as I do for you, then I am asking you to tear your heart out and live without it. But you must do it, money and down. My brave lioness, you must. Oh my God. I sobbed during this part. No matter, I reread it, making notes for this, and I sobbed. Every time I watch that scene, I cry.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, then Jamie tells Claire that he knows about the baby. He tells her, tomorrow I will die. This child is all that will be left of me ever. And I ask you, Claire, I beg you, see it safe. And this also is one of my favorite lines, even as heartbreaking as it is. Claire thinks to herself, I stood still, vision blurring, and in that moment I heard my heart break. It was a small, clean sound, like the snapping of a flower stem. The way Diana describes things is so beautiful, and it's like you're there. It's like you're experiencing it. You can, you're living this with her. So of course, this is the moment that Claire realizes she has to go. She has no other option. And he tells her, just like we see in the show, about how he will find her, 200 years of purgatory, all that. They make love like they do in the show, and they try to memorize every single detail of each other. And afterwards, Jamie holds Claire in his arms as they sleep. He tells her that he wanted to sleep that way one more time, holding her and their baby. Oh my God. Oh my God.
You've got it, Katie. You've got it. Just keep going. You're doing it's a lot.
It's so sad.
You're
It
doing
is
great.
so
Sad.
because she was going to cry, or
Yeah, we're all getting emotional
It's
here.
so sad. So Claire wakes near dawn and she tells Jamie that she wants him to mark her, to cut her deep enough to leave a scar. She says, I want to take your touch with me, to have something of you that will stay with me always. I don't care if it hurts. Nothing could hurt more than leaving you. At least when I touch it, wherever I am, I can feel your touch on me. She holds out her right hand for Jamie to take. And let me read this little passage because I can't summarize it any better. I just have to read it. He turned my palm upward, examining it carefully, then raised it to his lips. A soft kiss in the well of the palm, then he seized the base of my thumb in a hard, sucking bite. Letting go, he swiftly cut into the numbed flesh. I felt no more than a mild burning sensation, but the blood welled at once. He brought the hand quickly to his mouth again, holding it there until the flow of blood slowed. He bound the wound, now stinging, carefully in a handkerchief, but not before I saw that the cut was in the shape of a small, slightly crooked letter J. I looked up to see that he was holding out the tiny knife to me. I took it and somewhat hesitantly took the hand he offered me. He closed his eyes briefly and set his lips, but a small grunt of pain escaped him as I pressed the tip of the knife into the fleshy pad at the base of his thumb. The Mount of Venus, a palm reader had told me, indicator of passion and love. It was only as I completed the small semicircular cut that I realized he had given me his left hand. I should have taken the other, I said. Your sword hilt will press on it. He smiled faintly. I could ask no more than to feel your touch on me in my last fight, whenever it comes. Unwrapping the blood-spotted handkerchief, I pressed my wounded hand tightly against his, fingers gripped together. The blood was warm and slick, not yet sticky between our hands. Blood of my blood, I whispered, and bone of my bone, he answered softly. Neither of us could finish the vow, so long as we both shall live, but the unspoken words hung aching between us. Finally, he smiled crookedly. Longer than that, he said firmly, and pulled me to him once more. Jamie goes on to say the same things about Frank as we see in the show, and the next part of the scene, I was screaming, not because it has anything to do with this scene, but because I'm later in reading the book. So I'm curious, just let me know what pops into your head when I read this little bit. Jamie says, they say in the old days, I'm sorry, Bessie, I'm so sorry. I know it's so sad. It's
okay.
so sad.
I cry every time at that
I do
part
too.
It's just so sad.
I'm trying not to. I know. I'm sorry. Okay.
Jenny, we're cold-hearted bitches.
I swear to God, I'm like, what's the dog doing? No. I'm just not the romantic one.
No. This
You
is a beautiful scene.
It is.
Let me add in this real quick. There was a guy on TikTok, like when I first got on it, he good looking guy, and he's like, I'm tired of the whole dating scene. You want to go get some pancakes and go to bed? And I was like, yes, sign me up. Like, none of this stuff. I don't need any of this romantic stuff. Just let's go. Pancakes in bed.
The new Netflix and chill, pancakes in bed. So Jamie says, they say in the old days, when a man would go forth to do a great deed, he would find a wise woman and ask her to bless him. He would stand looking forth in the direction he would go, and she would come behind him to say the words of the prayer over him. When she finished, he would walk straight out and not look back, for that was ill luck to his quest. He touches Claire's face, turns away facing the open door, draws a deep breath, and says, bless me then, wise woman, and go. Immediately when I read that, she had just released the title for book 10. And that is A Blessing for a Warrior Going Out. So I was like, oh my God, I know what the blessing is now. I know the story behind that. So, but,
Love that you caught that. And I want to tell you, like, as you keep going, the blessing, it comes back a lot of times.
Oh,
so I can't wait for you to see all the ways that it comes back.
yay. Yep. Oh, that's so exciting. So Claire starts to bless Jamie, but they hear voices and footsteps. Jamie recognizes them as English voices, and he pushes Claire back toward the back of the cottage because there's an opening in the wall where she can escape. The English aren't expecting anyone to be in the cottage, so they did not send a soldier around the back. Claire starts running for that opening, and Jamie runs back to the doorway, hand on his sword. Claire stops, and she turns around to get one last look at Jamie. He turns his head, sees her, and rushes to her, pushing her against the wall, telling her he must have her one more time. And it isn't romantic. It's not like we usually see in the show. It's urgent, it's raw, and it's just full of heartbreak. It's two people clinging to each other as their world falls apart around them. It's the physical expression of goodbye. This is the way they communicate best with their bodies. And they're pouring everything they have into their last moment together. So the voices grow closer, and Jamie tells Claire to name the baby Brian, and he pushes her towards that opening in the back. She runs, and she glances back once more and sees Jamie in the middle of the doorway grabbing his sword, and his dirk is in his other hand. So Claire runs up the hill to the stone circle, and it's not an easy climb. She's running through branches, she's tripping over rocks, and she hears someone behind her, so she books it, and she finally makes it to the stone circle. She looks down the hill trying to see what is happening, if Jamie is okay, but then a soldier emerges from a bush. She takes off running and hurls herself through the cleft in the rock. And that's it. That's the end of that scene in the book. So the show gives us this slow, heartbreaking goodbye. It's calm. They take their time dancing to the stones. They say, I love you. He tells her goodbye. But in the book, that moment is quick and panicked. There's no time to breathe, no calm. She's literally running for her life, and she hurls herself into the stone. I will say I love the dance to the stones. I think it was so beautifully done, and I honestly actually prefer that to Claire rushing to the stones being chased. But that being said, there's so much I wish they would have kept in the show. I loved Jamie and Claire getting to spend one last night together, just the two of them. But the part I desperately wish was included was the carving of initials into each other's palms. Jamie and Claire both know that what they have is about to be torn apart. So when they mark each other's flesh, they're saying, I may not be able to see you. You may not be physically with me, but you're always here. Your soul is always with me. That kind of symbolism captures everything Outlander is about. Love that transcends centuries, sacrifice that leaves scars, both literal and emotional. Now, in the show, we do get the emotional goodbye at Craignadoon, and it's beautifully written and acted out. But without the carving scene, I feel like we lose a layer of depth. That sense that they've left a permanent mark on each other. Yes, she can touch the scar and feel his touch, but I feel like it's bigger than that. It's about carrying a piece of everything they've lost together and everything they shared together. Even apart, that mark reminds them of who they were together and what they meant to each other and what they still mean to each other. In the show, they say, blood of my blood, bone of my bone, so long as we both shall live. But in the book, when they say that, it was like a blood bond, almost like a renewing of their vows, telling each other, you will always be with me and I will always be with you. I'm a part of you and you're a part of me, no matter how far apart we are. And also in the book, they couldn't say, so long as we both shall live. Of course, because Jamie was preparing to die, but also because their love transcends death. Jamie even tells her longer than that because they're both thinking, so long as we both shall live. The physical act of carving initials isn't just romantic, it's spiritual. It's Jamie and Claire's way of defying the forces trying to separate them. History, fate, even death, and making sure that they will always be connected. And from a storytelling perspective, it could have given the show something powerful to call back to later. When Claire's back in her own time, we could have seen that scar on her palm and see that visual reminder of everything she lost. We could see Jamie in prison or at Hellwater touching and looking at his scar when he's, or any time he's going through all that he has to endure over those 20 years. Scars have always carried deep meaning in Outlander. They're more than reminders of pain. They're proof of survival, of love, of everything that shapes these characters into who they are. For example, Jamie's back tells his story, the battles he's fought, the suffering he's endured for loyalty and love. Without the carving scene, we miss a chance to see that same story reflected from Claire's side. A visible reminder that she's been changed, shaped, and marked not just by time, but by him. It would have balanced their stories, showing that their connection leaves its mark on both of them. Now, I know Claire has Brianna, who reminds her every day of Jamie, but Brianna's not a scar. She is Jamie and Claire's love and hope personified. So, all in all, that missing scene isn't just about what we see, it's about what we feel. The carving of their initials would have carried so much of what Outlander is. Love that endures, pain that transforms, and scars that tell stories. It would have shown who Jamie and Claire truly are. Two people forever marked by each other, two souls bound together, holding on to love even when time pulls them apart.
The end.
Okay. That was really beautiful. And
Very
Liz, I'm
nice.
proud of you. You were bawling, but you guys got through it. I'm proud of you both. Katie, I don't know how you
I
held it
didn't
together.
cry.
No. So I want to say a couple things. I really love that you said about scars and the storytelling. and this is the notes when you said that this was your topic, is that I've always thought that in the series as a whole, Diana uses markings and scars, like you said, of symbols and love. And the reason that I thought it was such a missed opportunity is because them carving their initials in each other was one of the only ways in the story that we saw a positive example of scars. So if you're
That's a good
thinking
point.
about Jamie's back, you brought it up, those scars are from Blackjack Randall, and it served as a reminder of him surviving, yes, but also his trauma and that he had no control over what happened to him. And then Dougal even using and showing those scars is another example of how those scars are Jamie's trauma and survival, but he had no control over them. And then if you flip that to the moment when he's carving Claire's initials and Claire's, carving him, that's him choosing the contrast of how he's getting that scar. He's choosing to mark himself, to do it as a symbol of love for Claire. And it's a really powerful reversal of pain being transformed into, I guess I could say, agency, like it's his own choice, and his survival being turned into a form of devotion. And I don't know, I just feel like throughout the series, we see scars like Roger scars, Bree scars. We can't really dive into them all here. We're on a time frame. But this was the one example where scars were being used and markings in a positive way and to reflect the love story. And it just feels really missed that they instead focused on the negative ones and the trauma ones instead of giving us this one beautiful choice that they both made to mark themselves permanently.
That's such a good point. It's so true.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything? Liz, you have something on this one? Yeah.
I do. Bessie, Katie, I did not mean to cry. I did not.
I'm surprised I didn't, so it's okay.
I didn't mean to cry, but honestly, you read that so beautifully, and I have not read book 2 in quite some time, but as you were going through the motions of that scene, it brought back all of the emotions that I remember I felt in the panic of what is going on and what is happening. This is gut-wrenching. And I love all of the points that you made, both Katie and Doreen. I think in the show, they really got down to the wire of like the minutes and seconds counting down to the Battle of Culloden. And so that's where the feeling of urgency, maybe from the book, kind of came into play, where, Jamie says, "We don't have time, Claire, we have to go now." And I also wanted to say that in the book, Claire does go herself to the stones at Craignadoon. But in the show, she's with Jamie doing the dance. And I find it very interesting because I wonder if in Diana's mind, she didn't put Jamie at the stones because maybe Claire really wouldn't have gone through. Maybe she would have decided, Jamie's here, I can't leave him, there's no way, I can't do it. At the stones, she didn't want to go either, but he, in that moment, was holding her physically and leading her hand to the stone. So in essence, she wasn't doing it by herself, but she knew that she was leaving him, versus in the book, she didn't, at that point, she couldn't change her mind. She had to commit and she had to go through. So I like the contrast of the two versions as well.
I think that's such a great point. And, like you said, he was with her. It's not like he forced her, but what choice did she have? He grabbed her hand and put it to the stone. But I think it's also a good point because she plays the what if game in Voyager. I just read that part where she's like, what if I would have stayed? Because he did live. What if and then she's like, Brianna and I most likely would have died in childbirth. So, she realizes she can't go down that rabbit hole of what if. So I think that's a great point.
I mean, here's the thing. We saw that she chooses Jamie over Brianna at other points in the story, but we're not, whatever, but that's not something to get into here. But one other thing I want to say is I wonder if Blood of My Blood was trying to use that abandoned cottage down by the stones as a way to connect the cottage in the books with Jamie and Claire. So That's just something totally off topic. But Jenny, I want to hear what you think about this scene.
I think everybody's points obviously are great. I think the other thing is when you start watching the show and reading this book, you can't help but wonder if this is a dream. And I think we've all kind of thought that at some point or another. But when he takes the time to carve the C into his thumb and the J into hers, I think that gives her proof in the future that this wasn't something dreamt in her head, that here is the physical proof that I remember this happening and it's physical now, 202 years later. The other thing is when she jumps through the cleft of the stone, for those who don't know, that's actually a legend in Scotland at Clavacarans, and there is a stone that actually has a cleft in it. And the story goes is that a Jacobite was being chased by a redcoat, and he jumped through the stones and disappeared through the other side. So I'm guessing that that's where Diana got her story from, that Claire jumped through the stones. Not the romantic ending you all wanted, but that's what you got.
That's romantic in itself, because it's almost like the only reason she chose to go through is because someone was chasing her and she had no choice. So,
Yeah.
however you want to look at it. Me and Jenny are not the romantics of the group. Okay. I feel like no one will be surprised that I picked something that had to do with the man, the myth, the legend, Master Raymond. And the event that I chose is what I refer to as Raymond's odd gifts. Before I start, I kind of want to explain to everyone the reason that I chose something that had to do with Master Raymond, not just because he's my favorite character, but more so because I want people to understand his importance in the story and how his messages and the things that he says are clues to everything in the story. So in chapter 31, we're with Jamie and Claire after the loss of faith. They've left Paris and returned to Scotland. And in a stray from the show, Master Raymond actually stays in touch, same way that so does Mulder Hildegard, Bouton, Louise. They all send letters. But unlike them, Raymond sends very peculiar yet meaningful trinkets in lieu of a letter. Now, when I first read about these packages, it didn't immediately strike me as earth-shattering or even anything worth mentioning, but it felt significant enough that I annotated the margins, asking myself, what does this mean? And are these objects telling a story? Then I kind of moved on. But as I kept getting deeper and deeper into the series, I found myself circling back to those items time and time again. Eventually, I pieced together that the trinkets that he was sending seemed to foreshadow events that come later in the books, and that they created this very subtle but powerful thread connecting the characters' fates and ultimately alluding to events that had to happen to fulfill all of the prophecies in the series, mainly the 9 Lives prophecy of Jamie's. So diving into the items, and I promise, it's just my first one that is very long, but it's because I think it's the most important one. We've got a collection of stones the size of Jamie's fingernails. Claire starts carrying the stones with her, and she notes that they are old, probably from Roman times. They had creatures carved on them, and she could feel that whoever had carved them with magic and put magic in them. She then starts pondering if they were a symbol like the signs of the Kabbalah she saw back in Master Raymond's apothecary. And that is what got my mind really going. Back in chapter 16, when we first meet Raymond, Claire is exploring his apothecary, and he has this cabinet painted with these same Kabbalistic symbols. And at the time, Claire recognized them, having seen them before within Uncle Lamb's findings and at his dig sites. And trust me, that's hugely significant, and I'm going to come back to it. So she asks Raymond in that moment, "Are you interested in Kabbalah?" And he tells her, "Why no, but the symbols do keep curious people out of the cabinet." He then swings open the cabinet, and Claire sees that it is a double cabinet. And him having touched the correct symbols in sequence opened hidden drawers, a pattern that he created that no one could decode, except for him or someone who possibly knew how to read the markings. From the drawer, he pulls a crystalline stone and tells her, "This is for you, for protection," and then explains of the stone, and this is his exact quote: "I call them the bones of the earth. They hold the essence of the matrix in which they grew, and whatever powers they held, you may find here as well." Now, there's a lot going on in that scene, and we know with that crystal in particular, he gave it to her because he had already seen that she was in danger from the poison, and it was a foreshadowing of what was to come and a protection that I guess he offered to ensure, her timeline. But for me, the most important part of that scene and that gift in itself is the quote and the pattern, or code, we could call it, in which he opened the cabinet. Listen again to that line. They hold the essence of the matrix in which they grew, and whatever powers they held, you may find here as well. If you break it down, that would suggest a connection to an origin-based power, something like being born from magic, from energy, or even being born in a unique realm. So it could apply to cough, cough, the space between, and the secrets of it, and how to access and harness it. And this line in particular, whatever powers they held, you may find here as well. Now, you guys can call me crazy. I don't care. I know everyone thinks I go too deep. But this could, on the surface, hint at the person holding them, Claire, will inherit or manifest abilities from it. Like she can potentially use this as a source of power. And that's fine. It can be a foreshadowing to Claire's nature or power. It hasn't been awakened yet. But I think it means that the energy, the language, or the code that produced the original stone also exists in an encrypted form within that subject or artifact, meaning that it's encoded in Claire's essence, like beyond her awareness. So something will awaken it, whether that be Jamie or others. I can't get into that because I don't want to put spoilers. Will, in theory, awaken her powers. And so after last week's podcast episode, I started changing the framework of how I view Master Raymond and everything he says and he does. I started approaching this scene and this particular quote with the train of thought that Jenny gave us with the Bible code, and putting messages in text or things he says that can decipher if you just crack his code. So someone would have to crack the code of the stones and their drawings to figure out how to unlock Claire's full power, or even how to, say, tap into the space between. The very same way, right, that people had to decipher the code and the symbols on his cabinet to find his hidden items. So in that moment, Raymond is showing us when you crack the code, something powerful is released. So in this quote, like in this instance, the matrix that he refers to is the framework of the code. So the structure, the pattern, however you want to look at it. And if that's true, you need someone to decipher it. So again, back to Jenny's brilliant Bible code analogy, if we applied it to the brand seer and he was able to decode the prophecy because Raymond put it there as a hidden message and a key to the timeline of everything, who's decoding the rest? Who is Raymond referring to or expecting to break his code for Claire to access her full powers? Okay, so it brings you back. Why did Claire recognize these patterns? Why was Lamb decoding these symbols hundreds of years later? What is he trying to decipher and why? And that starts getting you, what is his role? Then you go further into that. What is Frank's connection to Lamb? They were both MI6. Lamb brought Frank to Claire. Why? What did the funny buggers of M16 know? And what about Roger? Why is Roger's father a time traveler on a mission from Frank that ends up saving Roger's life? Are they actual clues? Are they the decoders? And if so, are Claire's powers the hidden information? And the you may find here as well hints that the answers are embedded within the stones and in the drawings on the stones, and that you just need to find someone who can read or access them. And then if you start down that path, that brings in the prophecies all throughout the story. asking if the prophecies in the story are actually just clues that Master Raymond has dropped to ensure the timeline, and if Claire needs to perform and decode these so that the stones are the key to the final event that has to take place at the end of the story. So that's my theory on those stones. And I'm sure there's a lot to look at there, but the main thing is that those carvings on the stone, I think the same way the carvings on the cabinet were there, are something that needs to be deciphered to unlock whatever the final power Claire needs is for the final. And I'm saying this very vague because I don't want to talk about things that happen in book 9 and the way that I think this is decoded and she taps into it. But I just think, like Jenny always says, we have to go deeper. And I always say that too. There's more than just he gave her these stones as a foreshadowing of power and protection. There is a hidden message there, just like the prophecies. So, okay, that's that. Next one we've got is rare herbs. I think that one's pretty clear. It's for Claire. She's going to create medicines and tonics well ahead of her time. She's going to use them to save Jamie. And I think it's also an ode to Master Raymond being Hippocrates. And Claire having an obsession with the Hippocratic Oath and following it in the past, even before it's invented, is really imperative to the timeline. And her developing medicines throughout time is kind of always the plan, I think, so that Raymond can have her doing that and he can bring them forward, tying into the thought of him being Hippocrates. The next one we have is Teeth of a Deer. And I got nothing on this one. The only person I've ever heard come up with anything for this one is Katie. Katie, will you give that one?
I just thought of Lord John Bay. Think of the deer, my dear. But I don't know. Like, would that be a foreshadowing to her marrying Lord John? I don't know. That's probably way out there, but
It's
that's
not,
just
though,
immediately what I
because
thought of with a deer.
I mean, it's kind of brilliant because it is a foreshadowing of something that has to happen to drive the storyline. And Lord John plays a huge role in a lot of the storylines, especially of later seasons and later books. So I think you might be onto something there. I think the next one we have is a bear digit. I don't even know what that is, but I think it's just referencing Ian, Jamie, and Claire being attacked by a bear and Jamie killing the bear. So that's a near-death experience for Jamie, so I guess it's part of his 9 lives prophecy when they're on the ridge. Next one we have is a vertebrae of a snake. I think, obviously, we all know that is foreshadowing Jamie being bit. And again, 9 lives prophecy, Claire saves his life. A lot of debate about if it's Bree or Claire that saves his life in that moment, but it's Bree. It's Claire, I'm telling you. And snakes and symbolism throughout the story, that's a whole different thing, but I digress about that because we don't have all day. The last thing is the peg-like thing from a seal. Don't know what that is. I don't know if that's an ode to the folklore of Brian being a Selkie, Claire's story being reminiscent of a Selkie, or a foreshadowing to Jamie seeing that seal when he's swimming out to Selkie Island and finds the gemstones. But I think it's kind of a foreshadowing of Ian being taken from Selkie Island because that's such a defining moment in the timeline. And it was needed to keep things on course for Gallus's death to play out, the Fraser prophecy to be introduced to the story. Because if they never went to Jamaica to look for Ian, none of that would have ever played out. Oh, wait. No, there's one more. The human molar. This one is so freaking creepy. I think it's a foreshadowing to Ottertooth and the entire Montauk 5 group. We know when Claire finds Ottertooth's skull, she notices it having a filling, and that is how she knows he was a time traveler. The Montauk 5 and Ottertooth and Wendigo play a huge role in the American storyline, The Fire, and also, to my point, they tie Master Raymond back into the storyline, because this is another example of that encoded clue. If Claire was able to decipher the filling that Ottertooth was a time traveler, she's breaking his code little by little as the story is going on. In that moment, he's showing her that he guided Ottertooth and the Montauk groups for a reason. They had a role to play, even if Claire didn't like the role, particularly that Wendigo played. And remember, we still don't know where the other Montauk groups are. There was more than the Montauk 5. There was 4 other groups. They could come back around and they could really expand storylines. But I don't know. I don't have 5 hours to get into that. So I think all in all, Claire finding that skull altered their journey and Jamie's survival in a big way. And ultimately, again, that ties into the 9 Lives prophecy. So now that I've rambled on about all that stuff for like 10 full minutes, I have a question for you guys, and I'm interested to see how you answer it, okay? Why do you think Diana wrote, not why and how do you think Diana wrote this part of the story? Because at this point, it's only book 2. So did she already have those future events planned out when she wrote this chapter, making it an intentional foreshadowing? Or did this chapter itself end up inspiring what came later? And if you go further into that, is Diana writing the whole story in code, just like Master Raymond, for all of us to decode? Was that too much? Did I confuse the shit out of everyone? Katie, go ahead.
No, I honestly think that she would have to have it pre-planned, right? Because like you have brilliantly said, those are huge plot points, right? So I almost wonder if she had those in mind to happen. She just didn't know when they were going to happen or what book they would happen in. But she, I would think she would have to.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine just randomly putting, a bear digit, a seal peg, all these things and be like, well, I'll try to incorporate those somehow. Like,
See if I can tie
I
that
would
in
think
later.
she would. Yeah. So I would think she would have to be planning those as big moments in the books.
So I do think that this part of the story is probably both a foreshadow and necessary to the plot. I think that two things can be true at the same time, and two things in a story can fulfill two different needs in a story as well. But one of the other things that I wanted to say was I really do feel that the show has not captured the magic of Master Raymond as well as the books have. And I think that it's a big miss. I think there's a big loop, even with later connections, just of show watchers. We've talked about this before, of the return, the infamous return, and a lot of show-only watchers asking the question, who is that?
Mm-hmm.
Who is that?
Oh.
It's honestly a valid question when you're talking about show only, because we have not seen this character since season 2. So it makes sense that there are a lot of questions around his reappearance, which is very short. So I do think that the show definitely went around the curb a little way too far without really touching on the depth or the magic of Master Raymond. But obviously in the books, we get a lot more about him.
So do you think in the book that Diana wrote it as you do think she wrote it when she wrote that she knew what was going to happen in the future already?
I think that there were probably parts of her story that she already had planned out. And obviously I can't speak to authoring because I am not one, but I would imagine that she had parts of the story planned out, and there were others that just kind of came to her as the story was moving. But in this case, I do think there were things that she had pre-planned.
Yeah.
Agree to your point when you said about the show. I think the show has not done a great job of including how magical things are in this universe. And it's almost like now they're trying to, in, season 7, part 2, it's like, wait, there's magic. You guys didn't know that? There's magic in here. It's not just about, time traveling is magic. Yeah, but there's more magic. And it's like, if you're just a show watcher, you're not going to understand that there, like Doreen said, is so much more to Master Raymond. There's so much more to Roger. It's just, and I know they only have so much time, and I get that, but I think they could have added a more magical aspect in there than just kind of expect us to understand it now. When we're 7 seasons in.
Jenny, what I agree with you. Yeah, it's mind-boggling to me. It's frustrating to me because people wonder why he's my favorite character, and I'm like, this is why. But Jenny, do you think that when Diana wrote that chapter, she already had these events planned out, or do you think it was kind of like a deciphering of things?
I think everything is planned out. There is no question in my mind at this point that everything is planned out. I will expand upon that when we get to Liz and her topic, but I think
Ooh.
the novellas are a way to fill in maybe some inconsistencies that show up and, maybe to add new depth to other stories. But I absolutely believe that although the first one, we have heard multiple times, it was, it was to test herself to see if she could write a book. I can see that book being standalone, but the things that must have happened from that book going forward, there's no doubt in my mind that it's all planned.
That's a really good point because you can feel the difference in book 1, and then in book 2 things just really start getting deeper. And by the time you get to book 9, you were like, is this the same series? Because what have I gotten into? So, all right, Liz, you're up, baby. Let's hear yours. What's your topic? I'm excited.
Okay, we're going to be discussing at this point the fake grave at St. Kilda's church. So let's dive right in, people. Let's dive right in. In the beginning of book 2, Claire and Brianna have arrived in Scotland. And this is a trip that Claire has wanted to take for many reasons. But one of those reasons mainly being that Claire is hoping to find out what happened to the men of Lallybroch after the Battle of Culloden in 1746. This has haunted Claire for a very, very long time. At the time of their visit, Claire has gotten wind of the Reverend Wakefield's passing, and both Claire and Brianna make their way to visit his home. There, they meet the infamously handsome and knowledgeable Roger McDaddy Woo. Questions surrounding what happened after the Battle of Culloden have been on Claire's mind for quite some time, and many of us generally can probably relate to the feeling of not knowing. But somehow the universe paved the way for this trip to happen at this time. Thank you, Master Raymond. Taking an interest in Claire's questions and seeking answers, Roger, being a dog with a bone, has resorted to what he does best: looking for history within history. Roger ultimately comes across journals that his father, the Reverend Wakefield, kept. Within these journals are notes about correspondences with Frank the Tank Randall, Claire's late husband and Brianna's father. One of the last letters between them discussed the Reverend Wakefield sending well wishes to Frank on Claire's pregnancy, because in a prior letter, Frank had mentioned Claire's pregnancy being dangerous and requesting prayers. The Reverend Wakefield also noted finding the grave of one Jonathan Wolverton Randall, also known as Blackjack Randall, in the kirkyard at St. Kilda's Church, and asking Frank if he would like to see a photograph of the headstone. After learning this information in Chapter 5, titled Beloved Wife, Roger takes Claire and Brianna to the kirkyard at St. Kilda's. Interestingly, it is Brianna who finds Blackjack Randall's grave. Roger had called Brianna the night before to let her know that he found where Blackjack is buried. Standing in the kirkyard, Brianna tells Roger she knows about Blackjack and that Frank had always admired him and spoken of him as an interesting person on the family tree, as well as a soldier who had received many commendations. Claire had been wandering the cemetery and is waved over by Brianna to Blackjack's headstone. Based on what we already know about Blackjack, this is not something Claire wanted to see for a variety of reasons, but she makes the call as a parent to appease Brianna and Roger in that moment before continuing to wander the kirkyard. Written on Blackjack's headstone is 1705 to 1746, with the date of his passing being exactly what Claire had told him would come to fruition when at Wentworth. Claire even says to herself in a brief moment, "I told you, you bastard." Claire asks Roger and Brianna if Blackjack is really dead, and they're both deeply puzzled because, of course he is, or at least he should be, right? Claire still has trauma that she's been carrying around all these years, but she can't disclose this to Roger and Brianna for many reasons. One being that Brianna has no idea about who she is and the story Claire has to tell. Yet. Roger chalks that question up to it being a hot day and Claire being overwhelmed, being in the kirkyard, but little does he know how significant this question is for Claire and how dire her need is for it to be answered for her peace of mind. I want to take a moment here to just mention Roger's relationship with Claire as being something notable as well. Throughout this book and other books, on many different occasions and in many different circumstances, Roger feels a pull towards Claire, not only to her physical beauty, but I also like to think as a motherly figure. Roger has a void based on the loss of his own mother and father, as well as the father he just recently lost. And there are certain women Roger meets along his journey who give him a sense of home and connection. And in a way, in this moment for Roger, it is Claire. Back in the kirkyard, leaving Claire for a few moments, Roger and Brianna make their way into the church to talk, and this conversation leads to their first smoochy smooch. They are abruptly interrupted when they hear a scream coming from outside from Claire. And making their way back outside, Roger and Brianna find Claire half lying on the ground in front of the headstone of none other than James Alexander Malcolm Mackenzie Fraser. Inscribed on the headstone are the words, "Beloved husband of Claire." Immediately, Claire starts having a fit, and Roger asks if the name is someone Claire knew. Claire replies, "Yes, he was my husband," and turning to Brianna says, "And your father." The conversations that ensue after this moment have Brianna initially treating Claire as if she had a head injury, with genuine concern. But over time, as Claire reveals more of the story about Brianna's true lineage, we get more of a reaction from Brianna. In the show, Claire takes Brianna on the trip to Scotland because Frank always wanted to and never got to go. But Claire does hear of the Reverend Wakefield's passing, and thus the show parallels this part of the story. However, the show portrays a different buildup to the reveal of the truth and what happens after Brianna finds out the truth. She becomes very, very angry. There have been many discussions about the level of Brianna's anger and whether or not her behavior is warranted. I see it from both sides. Brianna believing her life is one thing when it's really another, and Claire keeping secrets because she made promises. But something I think the show does well is express the relationship between Roger and Claire and Roger and Brianna. Both are intimate in their own ways, both are emotional in their own ways, and both portray connections in their own ways. It would have been amazing for the show to include this grave. I think that it not only creates a connection to events that happen earlier in the story, but would lend itself so incredibly well to information that is shared later in the books and also later in the series. So what do you all think about this part of the story?
Liz's love for Frank is going to get multiplied. Doreen's hate for Frank will intensify. That's all I can say.
Let's go! Listen, I say this every time. Whenever Liz is like, Frank the Tank, I'm like, I just want to see Frank ran over by a tank. I say that over.
Do you guys remember that commercial of the football player at the deli where he's like, "Number 44, that's me, ladies. Get some cold cuts. Get some cold cuts." I'm like, Frank the Tank. Frank the Tank. Get some Frank. Get some Frank.
So I hope this is as important as I think it is. When I first started to figure out where I wanted to go with this, of course it was Frank is a jerk. He put Jamie next to Blackjack for all eternity. And then I got to thinking, he was so angry with Claire that this was his way of taking out his anger with their marriage on each other. And then I started to think about the Bible code. And then I started to think about our stuff from last week. And I thought, you know what? Frank is way too smart for this. There's no way that there isn't meaning. So I've been doing some videos on TikTok regarding meanings of names and stuff like that. So I thought, let me start with St. Kilda. There isn't a St. Kilda to begin with. There's no patron saint. There's no Catholic saint that has that name. So I did a little bit of a deep dive, and it turns out that the name is probably mistranscribed through transcriptions. And it's actually more than likely a word that means hurta, which is taken from the Irish, which means gloom or death, which is kind of appropriate because it's a kirkyard. So further deep dive, turns out that it's also meant to be I hurt, EIHIRT, dangerous or death-like. But it comes from an Icelandic drawing, which goes back to what you're saying, Doreen, about Master Raymond and having almost like hieroglyphics and having to break down words. So the name of Herta means the island of St. Kilda. So it's an archipelago that is off of Scotland. So when you look at it from an aerial view, it is in the shape of a deer. So I know, look at your fucking faces. I'm sorry, blurt that out, but like now I'm shaking because I'm so excited to get to this. So it actually means, Herter means stag. And like I say, St. Kilda.
No.
She's having a meltdown over Frank. I know. So Herta means stag, which is what St. Kilda looks like from an aerial view. So then it got me thinking, stag, wait a minute, what about the brooches? The brooch that Jamie wears, that Frank saw, is two deer. They go head to tail in like a circle. So I went deep into that and I looked up specific kind of deer. There's one called a red deer and there's one called hold on. I lost my page. I'm not kidding. I'm shaking when I'm telling you guys this because it's so deep. One is a roe deer. They are known as messengers through the afterworld. So the red deer means power and royalty. The majestic stag is a symbol of leadership, power, and monarchy. Renewal of life. Connection to the other world, spiritual and sacred. So the roe deer is gentleness and love, wisdom and agility, resilience, spiritual pursuit, shared symbolism, spiritual messengers. Both type of deer are seen as spiritual messengers. There's a specific word I got to find here. I think they were seen as cattle messengers. So between our world and through the space between. So Frank was way too smart to just randomly place them together. And this goes with what I keep saying is that it's way deeper than we think. So he would not, knowing that Blackjack was killed on the field of Culloden, he would never just pick a random site to place his body on St. Kilda. So there is meaning there. I haven't gotten there yet. So I don't know. That's kind of where I went with it. What do you have to say?
Frank the Tank!
No.
Frank the Tank!
No. Okay, I'm going to make this quick. I have a question, Jenny. Are you saying that the two stags in this concept would be Frank and Jamie, or would it be Frank and Blackjack Randall?
No, Frank, it means Jamie and Claire. That's who I think they represent. Thank you for bringing that up because that was a whole nother train of thought. When I tell you, like when I found this, I couldn't keep my thoughts straight. So I think it generally means that it's Jamie and Claire. He's the red deer. She's the roe deer.
And so Frank's role, similar to what I was saying with like Uncle Lamb and Frank both being in MI6.
Mm-hmm.
And I was theorizing that Lamb was deciphering those codes and he was decoding prophecies as a result. So
Right.
in this train of thought, Frank would be decoding things through historical text or historical ways, and he would be doing the actions that he does in the story to kind of fulfill that role in history?
No, see where I was going with it was he is leaving. This information that I'm gathering was probably available at the same time it would be for fake, Frank Randall back in 1940, whatever. So, or even 60s. I think that he is putting together all of this information and he's leaving the cipher for Brianna and the kids to maybe figure out. So, and he's trying to leave it in a way that only they would know. I mean, they didn't just happen to come upon a random grave at St. Kilda. Like that's too much of like predestination for me to believe in. Something had to have led them there. Did we miss something earlier in the book, or is it something that's going to be laid out that they were sent in that direction by Frank? I think he's leaving codes all over the place for them to find.
Isn't St. Kilda, didn't Jamie tell Lord John that there's a shrine to St. Kilda, or is that a different thing I'm thinking of? Is that a different one I'm thinking
I
of?
do not remember, but I do know that this church, this is St. Kilda. And like I said, that saint does not exist. They think it's just a mutation of handwriting down names and it being incorrectly transcribed. Do you remember anything specific, Dorian?
No, but I do know that this has triggered a lot of stuff in my brain, and that now I'm going to really start digging deep into this and what it could mean and represent in the story, because it also ties in the foreshadowing of my point that I brought in about the deer, and that maybe this was a foreshadowing to that event. So,
Right. So both you and Katie saying, look to the deer, my dear, look to the deer. I looked to the deer and this is what I uncovered. And also Herter means stags in Norse, which that's all of Jamie's
Well, I was going to say, Jamie,
bloodline.
Master Raymond always saw him as a Viking.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's
Red
where
aura.
this is all stemming from. So when I came across this, I was like, oh my God, this is mind blowing. So
connections are connecting.
they are. And like I said, it's only through these conversations that you start to like really, I don't know. You can think that we go too deep. Apparently, we're not going deep enough, because every time I stumble upon something like this and make a video, I think I'm going way too deep into this. People are going to think I'm nuts. But there's no way she doesn't know this, Diana.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I just think it goes to show what a genius she is, because how the way that she writes things and connects things and leaves just little, breadcrumbs of things, it's just absolutely genius.
So that means to me that this is absolutely planned out. You can't just randomly stick that in a book and be like, oh, by the way, this is what that meant. Didn't know that. She absolutely planned all of this out.
And the fans, the readers who have the motivation to do the deep dives and dig deeper are going to be the ones who uncover the information and make the connections and do the theorizing and have the conversations. I agree.
And I think that's funny, because we were just talking about breaking codes. So it's like, are we breaking Diana's code?
That's what I was saying. That's why, yes, in the question that I asked at the end of that was, do you guys think that Diana was foreshadowing if this came back, or if she is writing the series like codes that she wants us to break?
Yeah.
And again,
and if I ever get to interview her, I'm asking her that question.
Yeah.
We didn't, when I brought in the Bible code, the episode that you guys sat out, she was like, what are you talking about, Bible code? I'm like, but this is really interesting. Like, this could very well be like the way we're supposed to read this book. Like, there's something in there. I mean, this is mind-boggling to me. Mind-boggling.
And the fact that she wrote Outlander as a test, I'm like, oh my God, I wish that I had that kind of a brain.
Yeah, like, oh, well, by the way.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel I'm sweating like so bad, because the last couple minutes of this, just, I feel like every time, and I don't know if you guys feel like this, but we talk about it. I feel like we have this synergy, and we all, I think even just the choices of what we chose to present today shows how differently we all interpret the story and the things that stand out to us. And I think, at least I hope, that when people are listening, each person is probably relating to one of us differently. Some people are like, I just love Jenny. She pulls shit out of her ass. She says things I would never think of. She really adds a depth. You guys see the love in the beauty in these stories, and I'm just kind of all over the place. But I really feel this episode in particular highlighted how each of us are viewing certain aspects of the story. And that's the dynamic I really enjoy about having these discussions as a group. But I don't know. I don't feel like we can expand anymore because we're at like an hour and a half into this episode.
Look, I think this is another great episode. We miss having, the four of us together. We do tend to be long-winded, but I think we give you guys some great insight and some really good information to sit with in the next week until the next episode. And my hope is that through this journey, we can connect all of these dots and it makes some sort of sense for all of us to understand the book.
I mean, listen, that's why we made a podcast, is because we can talk about this forever. So we'll just keep on making episodes and, yapping away about Outlander. It's the best thing to talk about. Why not?
It is. There's so many different directions we can go with really everything. And it's really nice to have these conversations at the round table with all of you ladies. And I think these types of conversations are very important to have. So I'm very grateful that we can have this time together.
Same. And I love that, Doreen, you've already said this, but I just want to reiterate it. Like, I love that we all bring something different to the table and different ideas. And, like how you said earlier in my part that was the only positive scar. I was like, oh my God, that's so true. Like, I don't know. I just didn't think of that. So I just thought of everything it stood for. So I always love getting to hear your guys' thoughts and theories, and it's just so fun. And I hope everybody else is enjoying it as well.
Yeah, me too. But I guess everyone's going to have to wait until our next episode to hear what we have in store for them next time.
We will see you in the space between.
And until next time, stay Outlander Unhinged.